Jonathan Roumie was about to speak one sentence that would silence Joyce Meyer in front of 15,000 people and force her to do something she hadn't done in 40 years of ministry, but what happened in the 90 seconds after he spoke those words would shock the Christian world so deeply that 3 major networks would refuse to air the footage. She had just publicly humiliated him on her own stage, using words so cutting that several audience members would later say they felt physical pain hearing them. The cameras were rolling live to 4.3 million streaming viewers across 89 countries, and Joyce was absolutely certain she had just destroyed the credibility of the man who dared to challenge her theology in her own house. Her smile was victorious, her posture was dominant, and the celebrity pastors watching from backstage were already texting each other about how brutally she had dismantled him. But Jonathan Roumie's response, a single sentence containing only 12 words, would trigger a chain reaction so unexpected, so emotionally devastating, and so spiritually powerful that it would be replayed over 200 million times in the first 48 hours alone. What was that one sentence that caused Joyce Meyer to stand up, walk off her platform, and do something in front of those 15,000 witnesses that her own staff would later describe as the most shocking moment in the history of their ministry? What could an actor who plays Jesus on television possibly say to one of the wealthiest and most influential Christian teachers in the world that would make her publicly renounce teachings she had built a $45 million empire upon? And why did 7 megachurch pastors who were in that sanctuary that day immediately resign from their positions within 72 hours, citing what they witnessed as the reason they could no longer continue in ministry the way they had been doing it? This is the story of the most explosive 18 minutes in modern Christian history, the moment when Hollywood humility collided with prosperity gospel power, when an actor's authenticity shattered a preacher's performance, and when 15,000 people watched a woman who had spent 4 decades building an empire realize that she had been constructing it on sand. It all started when Joyce Meyer made the catastrophic mistake of assuming that fame, wealth, and influence were proof that God approved of her message. 3 days earlier, at a modest apartment in Los Angeles, Jonathan Roumie was sitting at his kitchen table reading the Gospel of Luke when his phone rang with an invitation that would test everything he believed about speaking truth in love. 3 days earlier, Jonathan Roumie was sitting at his modest Los Angeles apartment reading the Gospel of Luke when his phone rang with an invitation that would test everything he believed. The voice belonged to Joyce Meyer's executive director, offering him a spot at her Faith Forward Summit in St. Louis, billing it as a conversation with the face of Jesus. Jonathan had heard about Joyce's ministry empire for years, the private jets, the $10 million headquarters, the courses promising financial breakthrough through faith formulas. He had watched her teachings with growing unease, the way she presented Jesus as a cosmic vending machine dispensing blessings for the right seed offerings. Every instinct told him this was a setup, but something deeper whispered this was exactly where God wanted him to go. The apartment around him told the story of a man who had chosen a different path. Bare walls except for his grandfather's hand-carved cross, a faded photo of his father who died thinking his son wasted his life on acting, and shelves of theology books worn from years of study. His kitchen table was covered with letters from viewers of The Chosen, people writing about how the show changed their understanding of who God is. One woman left her prosperity gospel church after finally grasping that Jesus never promised wealth, only his presence through suffering. Another man, formerly suicidal, found hope learning that Jesus wept with those who weep, not just celebrated with those who prosper. Jonathan had never monetized his portrayal of Jesus, turning down endorsement deals worth millions because selling Christ's image felt like betrayal. He drove a 12-year-old Honda Civic, wore Target clothes, and gave away most of his income to organizations serving the poor. His life was built on one costly conviction: following Jesus meant looking like Jesus, and Jesus had nowhere to lay his head. But this invitation felt different. Not safer, but necessary. The kind of moment where silence would be cowardice and speaking might cost everything. As Jonathan researched Joyce's recent work, his heartbreak deepened. Her Miraculous Mindset Masterclass cost $2,997, promising that right thinking about prosperity would unlock divine abundance. VIP book packages ran $5,000 for a meet and greet and personal prophetic word. Her social media showcased designer clothes, luxury vacations, and mansions as proof God rewards true believers. The comments broke his heart most, struggling people convinced that sowing money into her ministry was their key to breakthrough, taught that poverty meant weak faith and suffering meant God's disappointment. Jonathan knew he was walking into an ambush. Joyce's team wanted him to endorse her ministry, not have honest dialogue. Challenging her theology on her stage, before her audience, with her cameras rolling, would end his welcome in Christian celebrity circles. The cost might be his career, his reputation, his platform. But the night before his flight, Jonathan knelt on his apartment floor and prayed through tears for wisdom to know when to speak, courage to value truth over approval, and grace to speak with the love Jesus showed when he overturned the money changers' tables. He thought about the woman at the well, the tax collector, the thief on the cross, broken people who found hope not in formulas but in being fully known and fully loved. Jonathan made peace with the possibility this trip might end his Christian platform forever. He packed his father's old blazer, his worn Bible, and nothing else. He wasn't going to promote anything or build anything. Sometimes God calls his people to be voices in the wilderness, and sometimes the wilderness is a megachurch stage where the gospel has been repackaged as a product. When Jonathan Roumie arrived at the Gateway Arena in St. Louis, he was struck by the contradiction before him. This wasn't a church, it was a branded entertainment complex. The entrance featured a 3-story glass atrium with crystal chandeliers, walls covered with enormous photos of Joyce Meyer looking powerful and polished, and a bookstore larger than the sanctuary where Jonathan grew up. The shelves displayed exclusively Joyce Meyer products, $34.99 study Bibles, $149, anointed jewelry, $997, prophetic mentorship course, USB drives, all spotlit like luxury goods. A banner proclaimed, "Sow your seed for supernatural harvest," with credit card logos beneath. Jonathan watched struggling people line up with arms full of products, convinced these purchases would unlock their breakthrough. The VIP green room backstage was worse. Leather furniture, fully stocked bar, 5-star catering. The room filled with celebrity pastors and Christian influencers, but nobody was praying. They networked aggressively, discussing social media metrics and book advances. One pastor bragged about his $50,000 speaking fee. Another explained trademarking sermon phrases for merchandise. A worship leader discussed structuring concerts to maximize album sales. One man said without shame, "Sunday morning is my sales funnel, everything I preach drives people to my online courses." Jonathan sat in the corner with his worn Bible, surrounded by modern-day money changers conducting business with enthusiasm that would make the Pharisees blush. A production assistant approached with a clipboard. "Mrs. Meyer wants this to feel spontaneous, but we've outlined key themes she'd like you to hit," she said with a practiced smile. "Talk about how playing Jesus brought abundance into your life. Reference financial blessings from the role. Our audience responds to prosperity testimonies. Great platform to promote any books or courses." Jonathan's stomach turned. Every suggested answer would make his role sound like an endorsement of prosperity gospel. He handed back the clipboard. "I'm not here to sell anything or promote prosperity. I'm just here to talk about Jesus." The assistant's face showed confusion, then annoyance, as if she'd never met someone who didn't understand how these events worked. From the wings, Jonathan watched 3 guests before him, each promoting products with Joyce guiding conversations toward purchase links. A worship leader pitched her $75 deluxe album. A coach discussed his $3,500 marriage retreat. An author did essentially a book commercial, Joyce holding it to camera multiple times, signed copies $60 in the lobby. Every interview followed the pattern: emotional hook, product pitch, limited time urgency, Joyce's spiritual endorsement. The audience responded on cue, applauding, laughing, pulling out credit cards before special pricing expired. Jonathan felt the weight settling on his shoulders. His message of free grace, of Jesus offering everything without price tags, would sound jarring in this environment constructed to extract maximum revenue from spiritual hunger. He watched the monitor showing audience faces, tired and hopeful and desperate for something real, being offered expensive substitutes. When signaled he was up, Jonathan closed his eyes. "Father, let me decrease so you can increase. Give me your words. Help me love Joyce while speaking truth she doesn't want to hear." He stood, straightened his father's worn blazer that cost less than the cheapest bookstore item, and walked toward the stage carrying nothing but his Bible and a heart already breaking for what was about to unfold. Joyce Meyer greeted Jonathan with her trademark smile as he walked onto stage, arms extended in a welcoming gesture the cameras captured perfectly. "Ladies and gentlemen, the man who brings Jesus to life on your screens, Jonathan Roumie." The audience of 15,000 erupted in applause. Jonathan waved humbly and sat down, immediately noticing how Joyce's smile didn't reach her eyes, how her posture suggested someone preparing for battle. She was sizing him up, calculating how to control the narrative. "So, Jonathan," Joyce began with practiced warmth, "you play Jesus on television." The emphasis on play was subtle but unmistakable. "Tell our audience what it's like pretending to be the Son of God for a living." The word pretending was deliberate, establishing that his work was mere performance. Jonathan felt the trap but responded gracefully. "Actually, Joyce, I don't think of it as pretending. I think of it as trying to honor who he truly was." The audience murmured approval, but Joyce's expression flickered with annoyance. She pivoted to more comfortable territory. "The Chosen has been incredibly successful financially, hasn't it? Millions in funding and revenue." Jonathan saw where this was heading. The show is crowdfunded, and profits go to production and charity. It's not about building wealth. Joyce laughed, but with an edge. "Surely you've been compensated well? There's nothing wrong with prosperity. God wants to bless his children." She was trying to trap him into admitting wealth or appearing falsely humble. "I'm comfortable, Joyce. I have what I need. I've never needed much." His simplicity frustrated her. Joyce leaned back, her smile forced. "Well, that's very noble of you." Her tone suggested disbelief. "I've built a ministry worth tens of millions. I fly private jets, live in beautiful homes, wear designer clothes, and I'm not ashamed because God wants his children to prosper." She gestured to her outfit worth thousands. "This is what favor looks like. This is biblical prosperity." The audience applauded, conditioned to affirm her lifestyle as spiritual victory. Jonathan chose his words carefully. "Joyce, I've spent a lot of time studying Jesus' words, and I don't see him promising financial prosperity as a reward for faith." He told the rich young ruler to sell everything. He said it's easier for a camel to go through a needle's eye than for a rich person to enter God's kingdom. The sanctuary went quiet. Several gasped. No one challenged Joyce on her own stage. Her face hardened, warmth completely gone. "Are you suggesting there's something wrong with my wealth, Jonathan?" All friendliness vanished. "Are you sitting here on my platform, judging how I live?" Jonathan stayed calm, gentle but firm. "I'm not judging you. I'm saying Jesus didn't promise wealth as evidence of faith. He promised his presence through suffering, that following him would cost us everything." The tension became palpable. Joyce's supporters shifted uncomfortably while others leaned forward, sensing something significant happening. Joyce stood up, a power move to intimidate. "Jonathan, with all due respect, everyone knew she was about to be disrespectful. You're an actor. You read lines other people write. You put on a costume and stand in front of cameras." Her voice got louder, sharper. "I've been in ministry 40 years. I've built a global organization reaching millions. I've written over 140 books. I've transformed countless lives." She was listing credentials like ammunition. "So forgive me if I don't take theological correction from someone who just plays dress up for a paycheck." The insult landed like a slap. The audience gasped. Joyce wasn't done. She leaned forward, face twisted with contempt. "You know what I really think, Jonathan?" False concern dripped from her voice. "I think you're just another Hollywood liberal who discovered Christians are a profitable market. You play Jesus because it pays well and makes you feel important. But you don't understand real faith." She gestured around the arena. "Real faith produces results. Financial results. Healing results. Breakthrough results." She pointed dismissively. Your Jesus is weak and poor. My Jesus wants me blessed. My Jesus wants abundance. My Jesus rewards those who truly believe. She paused, then delivered what she thought would be the killing blow. Maybe if you had more faith, Jonathan, you'd have more to show for it than a 12-year-old car and Target clothes. The cruelty was unmistakable. Several audience members looked shocked their beloved teacher could be so cruel. Joyce sat back with satisfaction, convinced she'd destroyed him before 15,000 witnesses and millions online. She expected anger or humiliation. She expected applause for putting this pretender in his place. She expected to maintain control. What she didn't expect was what happened next. The sanctuary fell into absolute silence. Not a cough, not a whisper, just cameras humming, capturing everything. Jonathan closed his eyes briefly, lips moving in silent prayer. When he opened them, tears were forming, but not from hurt or anger. Tears of compassion. He looked at Joyce not with deserved hatred, but with heartbreaking love that only comes from truly understanding someone's pain beneath their cruelty. And then Jonathan Roumie spoke 12 words that would change everything. Jonathan leaned forward in his chair, and when he spoke, his voice was so gentle it was almost a whisper, yet in that silent sanctuary every single person heard him clearly. The 12 words came out slowly, deliberately, each one carrying the weight of 2,000 years of truth. Joyce, Jesus never wore designer clothes, but he wore a crown of thorns for you. The words landed like thunder in that massive arena. For a moment, nothing happened. Then everything happened at once. Joyce Meyer's face went completely white, all the blood draining away as if she'd been physically struck. Her mouth opened but no sound came out. Her hands, which had been gesturing so confidently moments before, began to shake visibly. Several audience members gasped audibly while others began to weep. The celebrity pastors watching from backstage would later say they felt the presence of God in that moment so powerfully that 3 of them fell to their knees right there in the wings. The cameras caught every microsecond of Joyce's reaction, the way her eyes widened in shock, the way her carefully constructed facade crumbled in real time, the way 40 years of justification and rationalization seemed to collapse under the weight of one simple, devastating truth. But Jonathan wasn't finished. He stood up slowly, and the compassion in his eyes was so genuine, so full of Christ-like love, that even Joyce's most devoted supporters would later admit they had never seen anyone look at another person with such tender mercy. Joyce, he continued, his voice breaking with emotion, he didn't promise you private jets. He promised you his presence through suffering. He didn't guarantee financial breakthrough. He guaranteed that following him would cost you everything. Each word was spoken not with anger or condemnation, but with the kind of love that breaks through defenses precisely because it refuses to wound. And he's not impressed by our empires, Joyce. He's looking for surrendered hearts. Jonathan took a step toward her, and Joyce visibly recoiled, not in fear of him but in fear of the truth he represented. I'm not your enemy, he said, his own tears flowing freely now. I'm your brother in Christ. And I'm begging you to remember why you started this ministry in the first place. Was it really about building wealth and living in luxury? Or was it about pointing people to Jesus? His voice rose slightly, not in anger but in passionate plea. Because right now, Joyce, you're pointing them to yourself. You're selling them a Jesus who looks suspiciously like the American dream instead of the Jesus who said, "Take up your cross and follow me." The sanctuary was absolutely silent except for the sound of people crying. Joyce tried to speak, her lips forming words, but her voice cracked and failed. I've helped millions. She managed to whisper, but even as she said it, her face showed that she no longer believed it herself. The armor she had spent 4 decades building, the justifications she had constructed, the theological gymnastics she had performed to align wealth with godliness, all of it was shattering before 15,000 witnesses. Jonathan's next words were so tender they would break the hearts of everyone who heard them. Joyce, you don't have to help millions. You just have to love the one person in front of you the way Jesus did. He didn't build stadiums. He washed feet. He paused, letting the truth settle. And he's not asking you to defend your empire. He's asking you to lay it down and pick up your cross instead. Joyce Meyer's knees buckled. Not metaphorically, but literally. The woman who had stood on stages around the world proclaiming prosperity, the woman who had written 140 books about getting what you want from God, the woman who had built a $45 million empire on the premise that faith produces wealth, actually fell to her knees on her own stage in front of her own audience with her own cameras recording every moment. And what happened in the next 90 seconds would shock the Christian world even more than Jonathan's 12 words had. What happened next would be replayed over 200 million times in the first 48 hours alone, analyzed by theologians, discussed in churches worldwide, and remembered as the moment when one of Christian media's biggest personalities chose truth over image. Joyce Meyer, still on her knees, looked up at the 15,000 people filling her arena, tears streaming down her face, and spoke words that no one in that building expected to hear. "He's right." Her voice cracked, barely audible through the microphone. "He's right, and I've been wrong for so long." The admission sent shockwaves through the sanctuary. People who had followed Joyce for decades sat frozen in their seats. Her own staff members backstage stood with hands over their mouths in disbelief. This was the woman who never admitted fault, who always had an answer, who built her brand on confidence and certainty. And now she was publicly confessing error on the biggest stage of her career. "I've been selling you what you wanted to hear instead of what you needed to hear," Joyce continued, her words coming faster now, like a dam breaking after years of pressure. "I convinced myself that my wealth was proof of God's favor, but I was just justifying my own choices." She gestured around the opulent arena with trembling hands. "We built this palace while Jesus said, 'Foxes have dens, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head.'" She began removing her expensive jewelry right there on stage, setting each piece down with shaking fingers. "I'm so sorry. To everyone I've misled. Everyone I've taken money from with false promises about prosperity being the measure of faith." The raw honesty was devastating to witness. This wasn't a calculated PR move or damage control. This was a woman whose carefully constructed world was collapsing, and she was choosing to let it fall rather than prop it up with more lies. Her sobs echoed through the sound system as she continued. "I've become exactly what Jesus confronted in the temple. I turned my Father's house into a marketplace. I made his gospel into a product I could sell." Jonathan walked over to where Joyce knelt and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. The gesture was so tender, so full of Christ-like compassion, that it broke something in the hearts of everyone watching. "Joyce, this is where grace begins," he said softly but clearly into his microphone so everyone could hear. "God isn't angry at you. He's been waiting for you to come home." He turned to address the entire arena. "Everyone in this room, we all need this same grace. Every single one of us has to come to the place where we realize our success means nothing and his love means everything." He looked back down at Joyce. "Can I pray with you?" The question was simple, but it represented everything. Surrender of control, acknowledgement of need, the first step toward authentic relationship with God. Joyce nodded, unable to form words through her tears. And as Jonathan began to pray, something extraordinary happened in that arena that had been built for performance and profit. For the first time in its history, genuine worship began to break out. Not the produced, choreographed kind that leads to offering appeals, but the raw, broken, authentic kind that happens when people encounter the real God instead of the version they've been sold. "Jesus," Jonathan prayed, his voice steady and full of love, "here is your daughter Joyce. She's tired of performing. She's tired of defending. She just wants to know you, not just teach about you. Meet her here in her brokenness, because that's where you do your best work." As he prayed, Joyce's sobs grew deeper, the kind of crying that comes from years of carrying weight that was never meant to be carried. She was mourning the decades spent building walls instead of bridges, selling products instead of sharing truth, performing Christianity instead of living it. The audience no longer sat as spectators. Throughout the sanctuary, people began leaving their seats and kneeling, some coming forward to the stage area, many crying, all of them sensing they were witnessing something sacred. Other pastors from the green room came out from backstage, some of them weeping themselves, convicted by what they had just witnessed. One well-known televangelist would later say, I watched Joyce fall, and I realized I was standing in the same spot she was, just hadn't admitted it yet. When the prayer ended, Joyce remained on her knees for a long moment, as if afraid to return to the reality of the empire she had built on shifting sand. Finally, she looked up at Jonathan with eyes that held something they hadn't contained in decades: genuine humility. "What do I do now?" she asked, her voice small and uncertain, like a child asking for direction. Jonathan smiled with the gentleness of someone who understood the journey from pride to grace because he had walked it himself. "Now you learn to walk with Jesus instead of trying to improve on him. Now you discover that being his daughter is better than being your own God." The transformation was visible in her face. The hardness was gone, replaced by a softness that comes from finally stopping the fight. As the service came to an unplanned end, there was no closing music, no product pitches, no altar call designed to collect contact information. Just the quiet awe of people who had witnessed something they knew would change them forever. In the days that followed, Joyce Meyer made a decision that sent shockwaves through the Christian media world. She announced she was immediately shutting down her prosperity gospel conferences, refunding all VIP package purchases, and restructuring her entire ministry. "I can't in good conscience continue teaching what I now see as a distortion of the gospel," she said in a simple video posted to her social media, her face bare of the usual professional makeup, filmed in what appeared to be her living room rather than a studio. "I've been pointing people to the wrong Jesus, and I need to make that right." The financial cost was staggering. Industry insiders estimated she walked away from over $30 million in projected annual revenue. Ministry partnerships dissolved. Fairweather friends disappeared. But for the first time in decades, Joyce experienced something money couldn't buy: the peace that comes from aligning your life with truth instead of profit. 6 months later, a small story appeared in a Detroit newspaper that most national media ignored, but it made Jonathan cry when he read it. Joyce Meyer had been spotted regularly at an inner-city community center, not with cameras or publicity teams, but simply serving. She volunteered at a food pantry on Thursdays, led a free Bible study for struggling single mothers on Tuesday evenings, and spent Saturday mornings reading to children at a homeless shelter. When a local reporter asked her about it, she said simply, "I'm learning what Jesus meant when he said to love your neighbor. It's not about programs or platforms. It's about the person right in front of you." One of those people was a 9-year-old girl named Destiny whose mother worked 2 jobs to keep them housed. Destiny told everyone who would listen, "Miss Joyce found the real Jesus, and now she's helping me find him too." The video of that day in the arena continued to spread across the internet, not because it was sensational, but because it was real. Comments poured in from around the world. "I left my prosperity gospel church after watching this," one person wrote. "If Joyce Meyer can humble herself before God, maybe I can too," wrote another. A megachurch pastor in Texas posted, "I watched this and realized I've been building my kingdom instead of his. I'm stepping down to reevaluate everything." The most powerful testimony came from a woman who had been on the verge of bankruptcy after sowing thousands into prosperity ministries. "I finally understand that God doesn't want my money. He wants my heart." Today, both Jonathan and Joyce continue their work, but with transformed foundations. Jonathan still portrays Jesus on screen, but with even deeper conviction about showing the real Christ, not the commercialized version. Joyce still teaches, but now in small community centers and church basements, pointing people toward the Jesus who had nowhere to lay his head, who promised suffering alongside joy, who called his followers to take up crosses, not claim kingdoms. Their encounter that day became a watershed moment, not just for them, but for thousands who witnessed it, a reminder that no one is too successful, too established, or too far gone to encounter the transforming power of authentic faith. The story continues to ripple outward, changing lives in ways no expensive course or conference package ever could. Because sometimes the most profound transformations don't happen when we finally get all the answers, but when we finally admit we've been asking the wrong questions. Sometimes the most powerful sermons are only 12 words long. And sometimes the greatest act of faith is not building an empire, but having the courage to walk away from one when you realize it was built on sand. If this story stirred something in your heart, Maybe it's time to ask yourself the same question Joyce asked that day. What happens now? The answer is beautifully simple. You take the next step toward the one who's been waiting for you all along, arms open, grace ready, love unlimited. Because he never wore designer clothes, but he wore a crown of thorns for you. If you believe some truths are worth standing up for no matter the cost, share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And tell us in the comments, what's the difference between building God's kingdom and building your own?